Hello, you're watching the business headlines on HW News with me, Ali Azhar. The current dispensation of the BJP-led NDA government has ruled the country in such a way that they have polarized votes. With sudden big bang reforms, they seem to want to take the bull by the horns and be proactive in their approach of governance. And while their intention may be right, the result often hasn't been. Examples would be demonetization and the hurriedly implemented GST. Also, politically, they haven't been very accommodating towards opposition, and their policy making has not always had the touch of inclusivity. So, the result of this polarization is either you hate them with a passion or you love them to a point where you're branded as a bhakt. One seldom notices neutrality in the opinion when it comes to the BJP. In effect, the message I'm trying to get across is that when the public at large have an either love or hate opinion of you, there is bound to be, along with a lot of praise, some criticism as well. And it is this criticism that our government does not seem to be dealing with very well. Sharing this same viewpoint is renowned economist and ex-RBI governor Dr Raghuram Rajan, who, via an essay released on his blog, criticized the government on its inability to deal with criticism. Mr. Rajan said that a lack of tolerance towards public as well as internal criticism can lead to mistakes in policy making, and governments do themselves a gross disservice by doing so. Further, he went on to say, and I quote, "If every critic gets a phone call from a government functionary asking them to back off or gets targeted by the ruling party's troll army, many will tone down their criticism. The government will then live in a pleasant make-believe environment until the harsh truth can no longer be denied." A practical example of what Mr. Rajan said can be noticed in the fact that the government, to begin with, denied that India was going through an economic slowdown. Then, after insurmountable pressure from all quarters, it finally admitted that yes, there is a slowdown, but it's a cyclical one and not a structural one, and the issue would take care of itself in time. What happens in such a scenario is that, like Mr. Rajan pointed out rightly, it leads to incorrect policy making. Therefore, by not willing to accept criticism and admit that the country is in a crisis, the government, instead of enacting policies to face a structural slowdown, come up with diluted measures to fix a minor problem. It's like a patient that has a heart attack and ends up getting treated for a fracture. The most recent classic example of this would be the Big Bang reforms announced by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. This included a relief on buyback of shares, rollback of surcharge on foreign portfolio investors or FPIs, and a rollback of surcharge on capital gains. However, what garnered the most attention was when she cut tax rates for companies by nearly 10%. And add to that, a tax rate of just 15% was announced for new manufacturing company. All and sundry hailed the move. The government received praises from all across the country. The stock market had a 2-day rally like never before. Very good, right? However, once the dust settled and the economists began to decipher the fine print of the reforms, it came to everyone's attention that by giving this benefit only to corporates and doing nothing for individuals and small and medium scale firms, the government has put more money in the hands of big business. Now, what big business does with this money is expand capacity, set up new factories, etc. This causes excess supply in the market. But the current state of affairs is so bad that there is no demand to absorb this excess supply. Therefore, in effect, the government is doing supply side measures to deal with what really is a demand problem. People don't have money to spend. They don't have income. They don't have employment. From where will the demand come? Moving on. Then the government instructs banks to give more credit. But banks cannot forcefully give credit to investors who are unwilling to borrow. Why would someone borrow to expand their businesses when there is no demand to absorb that supply? Address the real issue, which is jobs, employment. This is what Mr. Rajan was talking about when he said mistakes in policy making because of lack of willing to accept criticism. What's even worse was when the government resorted to doctoring statistics to give a better picture of the economy. It is now a well-known fact that GDP data was tampered with. Another well-known economist, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, published a paper at Harvard University which said that figures for GDP calculations were higher by a full 2.5 percentage points for the past few years. Further, the government was proved to have manipulated fiscal deficit figures as well. So, by making public sector entities such as the Food Corporation of India borrow money to finance its needs, the government did not include that amount in its balance sheet, thereby showing that the fiscal deficit was well within projections. Even when it came to jobs data, they denied there was a crisis and kept alluding to the EPFO data until a report saying that unemployment was at a 45-year high was made public. Mr. Rajan also gave a specific example when he stated that two members of the recently constituted PM's Economic Advisory Council were dropped when they voiced their concerns on government's policies, specifically relating to the controversial decision of the centre to borrow money from overseas markets via sale of sovereign bonds. Mr. Rajan concluded by attributing this ability of not being able to take criticism to insecurity on the part of the government, and went on to say that criticism is essential to foster competition and stimulate ideas. A relevant and well-worded quote coined by American politician Norman Vincent Peale is perhaps apt. He said, "The trouble with most of us is that we'd rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism." Thank you for watching HW News. This is me signing off. Have a great day.